We need to tell more African stories. When I mean African stories, I mean those stories of our entrepreneurs, especially, who have done so much in very difficult situations with very limited resources to solve problems in Africa. Some of them are going towards the angle of social enterprises. Not only are they profit driven, but also at the same time helping impact others. When we talk about the stories of African entrepreneurs, we want to look at it from this angle. I remember Chimamanda in one of her, TED talks, where she talks about the dangers of a single story. And this is something that we see that when people tell our stories for us, they tell it to suit their narratives. And when we talk about narratives, it's a bunch of stories, a series of stories that come up to make a collective story or collective narrative. And this is something that we've seen, uh, especially when we talk about African entrepreneurs. Telling more African stories would help us see how we can do it good, better for ourselves, not someone else doing it for us. And what I mean by this is when we start looking at, what people have done in the continent to help shape, to help push businesses forward, you would see that it's against all odds. And this is something that should be praised. These are stories that should be highlighted so that it would serve as a way to push others to also drive to get to that point where they are also solving problems. And I would give an example here. If you think about a country like Finland, it's branded one of the happiest country of the world because the social system works. People are able to get access to healthcare, to the basic needs of life. Yet, it doesn't mean that the country doesn't have other problems that they're dealing with. For example, in the past, I have highlighted issues around racism. This is a problem and a social problem that the government is spending quite a lot of money to solve. Yet, they are able to brand themselves as a happy country. Think of a country like Nigeria. We know we are plagued with many problems, infrastructural problems, resources, and things don't work the way it should work oftentimes. Beyond this, how can we look at the positives and see ways that we can tell our stories to shape the narratives that we are forming for ourselves? Because this branding is really important. I was watching last week a podcast, the Honest Bunch podcast, where I was listening to two entrepreneurs, two African entrepreneurs that live in the US. And they were talking about the opportunities that they had been out there and the opportunities that they have seen in Nigeria. And I would tell this, which might not be a very popular thing to say, that uh, Nigeria and Africa holds a very huge potential when tapped into. When we start telling the stories of those who have done very well in the continent, it would help other people see that certain things are possible even when the resources is not all available. We need to start looking at ways to not to look at the problems. Of course, we have to examine the problems, but actually to look more at solutions, to look more at how can we make it better. And I would give an example here. If you think about how people nowadays, for example, in Nigeria, are always eager to start something and get rich quick, you find that it goes away from the normal trend, which is when you start a business, you work hard at it and you grow it, and probably you would get rich from it. So there is no getting rich without the hard work. That means we have to tell How do people start building small businesses that would impact lives? How do they start solving problems for other people? And this is what it's about. When we are able to recognize the problems that others have and see ways that we can solve it, we are creating opportunities in that way. We are looking beyond the problems that exist, the problems we must acknowledge that are there. But beyond the problems, how do we look at the solutions? An example here is Flutterwave, for example, which became a very big company in 2021 that went unicorn. And when we mean by unicorn, it means a company that went over $1 billion valuation. So you think about what they've done. They've just basically looked at the economy and see how they are able to solve the problem of digital banking, make it easy for people to transfer money outside the institutional banking system. And that drew attention from everywhere, and investment came with it, and they became a unicorn in a very little time. We've seen people also who have left their lives living in the West, going back to Africa to start businesses. A very good example is Steve Muwaya, something like that, that if I remember his name. But he is the founder of Econet. What he has done is he left life in the West and was able to establish a very thriving telecommunication business in Africa, which is a very rare thing to do back in the days. So if he had stayed back in the West rather than going back to his home country, and from the report I read, he started with only about $75, which is something as little as possible, but he has built a $1 billion business today. So the idea is when we start small at something and we are good at it, the potential that it would grow over time is there. And that potential is what we want to tap into. And those stories of the struggles of making it work are things we're supposed to start telling, so that it doesn't only show the positive side of ourselves as Africans, but also the possibilities that we could accomplish, and show that as an example to other people coming. Let's imagine, for example, one, two, three people start a small business. Could be, for example, a plumbing business. And this is something that we often take for granted, because small businesses are what make up the economy of most Western countries. The plumber, the trader, those little businesses that meet the needs of the ordinary people. Collectively, they actually hold the economy. In the same way, when we think about Africa, when we start looking at ways that we can solve individual problems and grow small businesses, over time, the potential to grow is there. If we start a small plumbing business today and we are really good at it, we are able to give good customer service. You serve one person very well and he likes your job. And he says, hey, I know someone who might like this job also. And you're able to get that contact, and you do that over a year, and you are able to do that work well. What do you think the multiplier effect is? It might be at one point that you are actually not able to fulfill the needs of your customer anymore. You might be overwhelmed with the work that is available, and you might need to hire someone else to help you do the job. What you've done is you've created employment for someone else. Imagine when one, two, three, four, five people are doing the same. What do you think the implication on the economy would be over time? A lot. And this is why we need to start thinking from how do we start building small and then growing it bit by bit, so that we are able to make small businesses the anchor of our economies, that we are able to impact lives, that we are able to grow organically. And this is what I want us to be able to think a bit about how we can start telling stories of people who have, despite all the struggles, been able to grow small businesses. Some of them have grown it to multi-million dollar businesses. Some of them are able to serve their communities. So it's not all about the profit, but it's all about impacting lives. So can we think, what are the things that we love that we can start doing that would help solve people's problem and help us earn money at the same time? When we look critically, we are sure to find these things. And this is something that I want us as Africans collectively to start looking at, ways that we can tell our stories, ways that we can build small businesses, ways that we can come together in the spirit of collaboration and start growing the real start solving real problems that we face in Africa. We're going to be sharing stories of individual Africans who have done well. And we're going to highlight some of the challenges that these guys faced. What are the hurdles? What are the recommendations that they would give to anyone wanting to start a business? And how can we collectively start looking beyond moving elsewhere to look for a better life, but actually developing ourselves and telling our individual stories? And this is something that would take us to that place where we want to be as Africans, and also would definitely impact life around the globe at the same time. Until next time, stay strong.